Ambassador Ziraal stepped off the transport ship and onto the human diplomatic station. The air felt wrong immediately. Not the temperature or the pressure. Those were adjusted perfectly for Valorian physiology. No, something else was missing. Zero was an empath, like all members of her species. The Valorians could feel the emotions of everyone around them as clearly as humans might feel heat from a fire. It was how her people had become the greatest diplomats in the galaxy. They could sense anger before it became violence, fear before it became panic, joy before it became celebration. Every species broadcast their feelings constantly, an invisible ocean of emotion that Valorians swam through as naturally as breathing. But here, in this corridor filled with humans, Zero felt nothing. She stopped walking. Her escort, a human woman named Captain Martinez, turned back with a polite smile. "Is something wrong, Ambassador?" Zira's antennae twitched, searching for any emotional signature. There were 12 humans visible in the corridor. Some were walking, some were talking, some were working at wall panels. They all looked normal enough. But emotionally, they were blank, empty, like sophisticated robots wearing flesh. Zero struggled to find words. "Forgive me, Captain. I am simply adjusting to your station." The captain's smile widened slightly. Still nothing from her emotional field. "Of course. This way, please. The diplomatic team is eager to meet you." They continued down the corridor. Zero kept reaching out with her empathic sense, trying to find something, anything. She had met species with weak emotional broadcasts before. The crystalline jur barely registered unless they were in extreme distress. But this was different. The humans weren't weak. They were absent, like trying to hear a sound that simply wasn't there. The Galactic Council had warned her that humans were unusual. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago, making them newcomers to the galactic community. They came from a planet where they had been the only sentient species, which was rare. Most worlds developed multiple intelligent species that learned to coexist. Humans had been alone, competing only against each other for millions of years. Perhaps that explained the emptiness. Perhaps isolation had damaged their ability to broadcast emotions. Zero felt a wave of pity. To live without feeling the emotional connection to those around you, it must be terribly lonely. The diplomatic chamber was large and comfortable, with seating arranged for both human and Valorian body types. 5 humans waited inside, all wearing formal attire. Captain Martinez made introductions. The lead diplomat was Dr. Sarah Chun, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. "Ambassador Ziraal," Dr. Chun said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "Welcome to humanity's first interstellar diplomatic station. We're honored by your presence." Zero touched the human's hand briefly, still feeling nothing. "The honor is mine, Dr. Chun. The Galactic Council has great hopes for this meeting." They settled into their seats. Zero tried to focus on the formal discussions, but the emotional void kept distracting her. The humans spoke about trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. They smiled and nodded and used all the right diplomatic language. But underneath, there was nothing. No nervousness about this first contact. No excitement about joining the galactic community. No fear of saying the wrong thing. Just empty, blank silence where emotion should be dot. It was deeply unsettling. They were 2 hours into the meeting when the alarm sounded. A sharp, piercing noise that made Zira's antennae flatten against her head. The humans all stood immediately, their movements smooth and coordinated. "What's happening?" Zirael asked. "Accident in the residential section," Captain Martinez said, already moving toward the door. "Please stay here, Ambassador. We'll handle it." But Ziro followed them out. As an ambassador, she needed to understand how humans responded to crisis. The group moved quickly through the corridors, and other humans joined them. Someone handed out emergency kits. Someone else was speaking rapidly into a communication device. They arrived at a recreational area where a crowd had gathered. Zero pushed forward to see what had happened, and then everything changed. A human child, no more than 7 or 8 years old, lay on the ground. A piece of equipment had fallen and trapped her leg. She was crying, her face wet with tears. And suddenly, the emotional void vanished. Fear crashed into Zero like a physical wave. Not just from one human, but from all of them. Dozens of humans, all broadcasting terror and concern so intense it nearly drove Zero to her knees. Protective instinct blazed like fire. Determination surged like electricity. The emotional ocean she had been searching for erupted all at once, overwhelming and powerful. But the humans didn't panic. Despite the intensity of their emotions, they moved with perfect coordination. 2 people lifted the equipment, while another pulled the child free. A medic was already scanning her leg with a device. Captain Martinez was clearing space, her voice calm and authoritative, even though Zero could feel waves of fear radiating from her. Fracture in the lower tibia, the medic announced. Not severe. We'll have her in medical in 2 minutes. They fashioned a stretcher from nearby materials. The child's mother appeared from somewhere, her emotional signature screaming with worry, but her hands were steady as she held her daughter's hand. They moved the child quickly and efficiently, the whole operation taking less than 5 minutes from alarm to evacuation. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the emotional storm faded. The humans who weren't needed in medical returned to their duties. The fear vanished. The protective instinct switched off. Within minutes, the humans around Zero were back to their previous state of emotional silence. Zero stood in the corridor, her body trembling. Dr. Chun approached her, concern visible on her face. "Are you all right, Ambassador?" "What?" Zero's voice shook. "What are you?" Dr. Chun tilted her head slightly. "I'm sorry. I don't understand the question." "Your emotions," Zero said. "You were empty. Then you were blazing with feeling. Now you're empty again. How is that possible?" Something flickered across Dr. Chun's face. Understanding, perhaps. "Ah, you're an empath. I should have realized. Most species are, aren't they?" "All species broadcast their emotions," Zero said. "It's a fundamental aspect of sentient life. But you turn yours on and off like a light." Dr. Chun was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Not on and off, Ambassador. More like focused and unfocused. We feel emotions all the time. We just don't always broadcast them. We don't always let them control us." "But how?" Zero demanded. "How can you feel such intense fear for that child and then simply stop?" "We don't stop feeling," Dr. Chun said. "We stop showing it when we need to. The fear is still there, but we put it aside to do what needs to be done. Is that not normal?" Zero stared at the human woman. "No," she whispered. "That is not normal at all." Dr. Chun smiled, and for just a moment, Zero felt something from her. Amusement, curiosity, and underneath it all, something that felt almost like pity. Then it was gone again, hidden behind that impenetrable wall. "Perhaps," Dr. Chun said softly, "we should continue this conversation in private. I think the Galactic Council needs to understand exactly what humanity is before we go any further." Zero nodded slowly, her antennae still trembling. She had come here to establish diplomatic relations with a new species. Instead, she had discovered something that would change the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. Humans could choose when to feel. They could choose when to care. And that choice, Zero was beginning to realize, made them the most dangerous species she had ever encountered. The Galactic Council Chamber held representatives from 47 species. all gathered in the massive spherical room that floated in neutral space. Zero stood at the central podium, her report displayed on screens visible to everyone present. "They are not emotionless," she explained, trying to keep her voice steady. "That was my first assumption, and it was wrong. Humans feel emotions as strongly as any species I have encountered, perhaps more strongly. But they control when those emotions are expressed and when they are hidden." Councillor Dexara of the Krath Empire leaned forward in his seat. The Krath were warriors, their bodies covered in armored plates, their minds driven by constant aggressive impulses. "You are saying they can hide fear? That is merely discipline. My warriors train to control their fear responses." "No," Zirel said firmly. "Your warriors feel fear constantly and learn to act despite it. I can sense their fear even when they are standing perfectly still. Humans are different. They can feel intense fear in one moment, then completely suppress it the next. Not hide it, not ignore it. Actually turn off the broadcast entirely while still retaining the emotion internally." Murmurs ran through the chamber. On the viewing screens, footage from the human diplomatic station played. The emergency with the child, captured by security cameras. The council members watched as the humans transformed from emotionally silent beings into blazing beacons of concern, then back to silence within minutes. "This is disturbing," said Representative Velsira of the Seleni hive mind. The Seleni looked like large, elegant insects and shared their emotions across their entire species through quantum entanglement. How can they function as a society if they cannot feel each other's emotional states? Dr. Sarah Chun, sitting in the human delegation area, raised her hand. The council acknowledged her with some hesitation. Humans had only observer status so far, not full membership. "May I respond to that question?" Dr. Chun asked politely. The council chair, an ancient being named Elder Morthus, gestured permission. Dr. Chun stood and walked to the podium beside Zero. The ambassador felt nothing from her, as expected. Just that unsettling void where emotions should flow freely. "We function quite well, actually," Dr. Chun said. "Humans communicate emotions through language, through facial expressions, through conscious choice. We tell each other how we feel. We don't broadcast it involuntarily. But why?" Velsira asked. "What evolutionary purpose does emotional suppression serve?" Dr. Chun pulled up her own presentation. Images of Earth appeared on the screens. Forests, oceans, mountains, and cities. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters," she explained. "We chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until they collapsed from exhaustion. To do that, we needed to care deeply about our families and tribes, giving us motivation to hunt. But we also needed to shut off empathy for the animals we were killing, or we would starve." More images appeared. Human history, captured in paintings and photographs. Wars, families, celebrations, tragedies. "We needed to fiercely love our children and protect them at all costs," Dr. Chung continued. "But we also needed to leave them with caregivers and go hunting without being overwhelmed by separation anxiety. We needed to cooperate with our tribe members, feeling strong social bonds. But we also needed to compete with other tribes for resources, which meant sometimes killing people who were very much like us." The council chamber was silent now. Every species present was watching the human diplomat with new attention. "Empathy as a constant state would have destroyed us," Dr. Chun said quietly. "We would have been paralyzed by the suffering we inflicted, even when that suffering was necessary for survival. So we evolved the ability to turn it on when we needed cooperation and connection, and turn it off when we needed to do difficult things. It's not a defect. It's an adaptation." Councillor Dexara stood abruptly. "You are describing the psychology of a predator species. We Krath are warriors, yes, but our aggression is constant. We cannot turn it off. It drives us, but it also limits us. We must fight, but we fight honorably because we cannot separate the joy of combat from the respect we feel for worthy opponents. You are saying humans can feel respect and then choose to ignore it? Dr. Chun met his gaze steadily. Yes, if we had to. The craft counselor's armored plates rattled, a sign of agitation. That is monstrous. Perhaps, Dr. Chun said, but it also means we can choose to show respect, even when we don't feel it. We can choose to be kind when it would be easier to be cruel. Every species in this council is bound by their emotional nature. You Krath must fight. The Valorians must seek harmony because discord causes them physical pain. The Seleni cannot act individually because they share all emotions across their hive. You are all constrained by what you feel. She paused, and for just a moment, Zero sensed something from her. Pride, maybe, or perhaps defiance. Humans are not constrained that way, Dr. Chung continued. We can feel empathy deeply and still make hard choices. We can love someone and still leave them. We can mourn our enemies and still defeat them. We are not slaves to our emotions. We are their masters. Elder Morthus spoke for the first time, his voice ancient and thoughtful. And what happens when humans choose not to feel empathy at all? And what happens when humanity at all? What stops you from becoming monsters? Dr. Chun smiled slightly. Zero felt another brief flicker of emotion from her. Sadness, perhaps. Or maybe it was something more complex. Nothing stops us, Dr. Chun admitted, except ourselves. Our cultures, our laws, our philosophies, our religions. We built entire civilizations around the question of when it's right to care and when it's necessary to be hard. We argue about it constantly. We write stories about it. We teach our children about it. We struggle with it every day. She pulled up more images. Human children in schools. Protesters holding signs. Courts and councils and parliaments. We are not guided by instinct toward moral behavior. We have to choose it, consciously, over and over again. Every human must decide, every day, to be good when being ruthless would be easier. Does that make us dangerous? Absolutely. Does it make us monstrous? That depends on what we choose. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some species were frightened. Others were fascinated. The craft delegation was having what looked like a fierce debate among themselves. Zero watched Dr. Chun return to her seat. The human woman's face was calm, but for just a moment, the ambassador sensed genuine emotion from her again. Concern, yes. Worry about how this revelation would affect humanity's place in the galaxy. But underneath that, there was something else. Determination. The same determination Zirel had felt from the humans during the emergency with the child. Humans would not back down. They would not apologize for what they were. They would not accept limitations placed on them by species who didn't understand them. The council took 3 days to reach a decision. During that time, they reviewed more footage of human history. They saw wars of stunning brutality and acts of incredible kindness, sometimes performed by the same individuals. They saw humans who had saved lives and then returned to killing without hesitation. They saw soldiers weeping over fallen enemies, then destroying the next target with perfect efficiency. The final vote was close. The council decided to offer humanity provisional membership, but with restrictions. Human military forces would be limited. Human colonies would be monitored. Human ships would carry observers from other species. They would be welcomed into the galaxy, but watched carefully. Zero delivered the decision to Dr. Chun in a private meeting. The human woman listened without expression, that familiar emotional void in place. When Zero finished, there was a long silence. Those terms are not acceptable, Dr. Chun said finally. I'm sorry? We will not accept military limitations that don't apply to other species. We will not accept monitoring that implies we are inherently untrustworthy. We will not be treated as criminals who haven't yet committed crimes. Zero felt a tremor of alarm. Dr. Chun, the Council has debated this extensively. These restrictions are for everyone's safety, including humanity's. They are meant to help you integrate peacefully into the galactic community. No, Dr. Chun said, and now Zirael felt emotion from her. Calm, patient empathy. The human was deliberately broadcasting understanding and compassion. They are meant to make the Council feel safer about something they don't understand. I do understand the Council's fear. I feel genuine sympathy for their position. But sympathy does not mean acceptance. The emotional broadcast cut off again. Dr. Chun stood. Please tell the Council that humanity appreciates their offer, but we will require equal status with all other member species. No additional restrictions, no special monitoring, no limitations beyond those that apply to everyone. We are happy to negotiate terms, but we will not negotiate from a position of assumed guilt. And if the Council refuses? Zero asked quietly. Dr. Chun smiled. It was a warm smile, friendly and understanding. Zero felt another deliberate pulse of emotion from her. Regret. Genuine, sincere regret. Then humanity will continue alone, Dr. Chun said softly. We have done so for our entire existence. We can continue doing so for as long as necessary. We would prefer to join the galactic community as equals, but we will not join it as prisoners. She walked to the door, then paused and looked back. Ambassador Zero, I want you to know that I truly do understand the Council's fear. What we are frightens you. The fact that we can choose whether to care, whether to feel, whether to show mercy. That is terrifying. But that same ability to choose is what makes us trustworthy. We can be monsters, yes, but we can also choose not to be. And we make that choice every single day. The door closed behind her, leaving Zirael alone with her thoughts. The ambassador sat in silence for a long time, considering the implications. Humanity had just refused the Council's terms with perfect politeness and absolute firmness. They had demonstrated empathy and understanding for the Council's position while simultaneously refusing to be bound by it. And somehow, that made them even more terrifying. 6 months after the failed negotiations, the Kreth Empire made its decision. If the Galactic Council would not restrain these strange new humans, then the Krath would test them themselves. It was the Krath way. Strength was proven through combat, and respect was earned through victory or honorable defeat. General Voxstar led the attack on the human colony world of New Perth. The Krath fleet arrived in overwhelming force. 3 battle groups against a single moderately defended colony. The humans had perhaps 10,000 military personnel on the planet and a small defensive fleet in orbit. The Krath brought 50,000 warriors and enough ships to glass the planet if necessary. Voxstar expected either immediate surrender or a glorious battle. What he got was something else entirely. The human defensive fleet did not charge forward to meet the Krath in heroic combat. Instead, they retreated to the planet, using the orbital stations as cover. When Krath ships pursued, they encountered weapons placements that had been hidden in the stations, camouflaged to look like civilian equipment. The Krath lost 6 ships before they realized the trap. On the ground, the pattern continued. Human forces evacuated the civilian population to underground shelters with machine-like efficiency. Within hours, every non-combatant was hidden away, leaving only military personnel on the surface. The Krath warriors landed expecting to find frightened colonists and desperate defenders. Instead, they found prepared positions and disciplined resistance. Voxstar had fought many species. The Krath way was straightforward. Overwhelming force, aggressive tactics, and the joy of honorable combat. Most species either matched this aggression and lost, or tried to defend passively and still lost. The humans did neither. They fought with cold efficiency when efficiency was needed. During the initial landing, human soldiers fired from concealed positions with devastating accuracy, then retreated before the Krath could close for melee combat. They used terrain expertly, turning forests and buildings into killing fields. They struck at supply lines and communication posts, disrupting Krath coordination. But then, during the first prisoner exchange, something strange happened. The humans had captured 12 Krath warriors in an ambush. Krath doctrine expected prisoners to be either killed immediately or held in harsh conditions to break their spirit. Instead, the humans treated the wounded warriors, fed them, and offered to return them under a temporary ceasefire for humanitarian purposes. Voxstar was deeply suspicious. He agreed to the exchange, but expected treachery. Instead, human medics arrived under a white flag and carefully transferred the Krath prisoners. One warrior had lost an arm in the fighting. The human medic who had treated him was openly weeping as she explained the procedures they had performed to save his life. "I'm so sorry," the medic said, tears streaming down her face. "We couldn't save your arm. The damage was too severe, but we stabilized the wound and prevented infection. You should recover fully." The Krath warrior stared at her in confusion. "Why do you weep for an enemy?" "Because you're hurt," she said simply. "Because I'm a doctor and I hate seeing anyone in pain." The warrior looked at his general. "She speaks truth. They treated us well. They gave us food and water and medicine. They asked about our families, about our lives." 2 hours after the prisoner exchange, those same medical facilities were back to treating human casualties, and those same medics were back to supporting combat operations. The woman who had wept for the Krath warrior's injury was now briefing soldiers on enemy weak points in Krath armor. Voxstar did not understand. The emotional whiplash made no sense. Were the humans truly compassionate, or was this elaborate psychological warfare? The answer, he would learn, was both. 3 weeks into the invasion, the Krath captured a human officer named Lieutenant James Rodriguez. The lieutenant had been leading a successful guerrilla campaign that had destroyed 2 Krath supply depots and killed nearly 100 warriors. Voxstar decided to interrogate the prisoner personally. Rodriguez was brought to the command center, his hands bound but otherwise unharmed. He looked young for a human, perhaps 25 standard years, with dark hair and tired eyes. Voxstar expected defiance or fear. Instead, the lieutenant sat calmly and waited. "You have fought well," Voxstar began. It was the traditional Krath opening to interrogation, acknowledging worthy opponents. "But you have lost. Your colony will fall within days. Tell me where your remaining forces are hiding, and I will ensure they receive honorable treatment." Rodriguez studied him for a moment. "You genuinely believe that, don't you? You think honor in combat is the most important thing?" Voxstar felt his plates rattle in irritation. "Belief is irrelevant. It is simply true." "For you, yes," Rodriguez said. "For Krath, honor and combat drive everything. Your entire culture, your government, your sense of self. You can't separate warfare from honor because your biology won't let you. You fight because you must, and you respect your opponents because not doing so would cause you psychological pain." The lieutenant leaned forward slightly. "I've been studying your species, General. We all have. That's why we offered to return your wounded warriors. We knew it would confuse you, make you question our motives. We knew you would see it as either weakness or manipulation. But really, it was both. We genuinely cared about those warriors suffering, and we deliberately used that care as a tactical advantage." Voxstar felt something he rarely experienced: uncertainty. "You admit to manipulation?" Of course, Rodriguez said. Why wouldn't I? You're trying to understand us, to figure out if we're honorable opponents worthy of respect or deceptive enemies worthy of destruction. The answer is we're both, General. We're whatever we need to be. The human's voice remained calm and conversational. Your warriors are driven by biological imperatives toward honor and combat. You can't help it. It's what you are. But humans? We choose. We can fight with honor when honor serves us. We can fight dirty when dirty wins. We can show mercy or cruelty, compassion or coldness, depending on what the situation requires. That is monstrous, Voxstar said quietly. Rodriguez nodded. Yes, it is. But it's also what makes us effective. Right now, I'm showing you empathy. I genuinely understand your position, General. You're confused by us. You're trying to categorize us into your framework of honor and combat, and we don't fit. I feel real sympathy for that confusion. The lieutenant's expression softened slightly. Voxstar, who had learned to read human facial expressions through study, recognized it as genuine compassion. The human truly did feel sympathy for him. But that sympathy doesn't mean I'll betray my people, Rodriguez continued. I can feel sorry for your confusion while still maintaining perfect operational security. I can understand your cultural needs while still exploiting them. I can genuinely care about the Krath warriors we've wounded while continuing to plan operations that will wound more of them. How? Voxstar demanded. How can you hold such contradictions in your mind? Rodriguez smiled sadly. Because we're human. We've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. Every human soldier cares about enemy casualties and still fights to win. Every human doctor grieves for patients they lose and moves on to the next patient. Every human parent loves their children fiercely and still sends them into the dangerous world to grow and learn. We are built for contradiction. Over the next week, Voxstar interrogated Rodriguez extensively. The lieutenant never revealed critical tactical information, but he freely discussed human psychology, human culture, and human military doctrine. He explained how human soldiers were trained to compartmentalize their emotions, to feel deeply during appropriate moments and suppress those feelings during combat. We cry at funerals, Rodriguez said during one session. We mourn our dead with genuine grief. But then we go back to fighting, and we put that grief aside until the fighting is done. It's not that we stop feeling it. We just stop letting it control us. The lieutenant described human history, the countless wars fought with tactics ranging from honorable single combat to total warfare targeting civilian populations. He explained how humans could commit atrocities while believing themselves moral, how they could justify terrible actions through complex ethical frameworks. Every human, Rodriguez said, is capable of being a monster. We all have that capacity. What makes us human is that we also have the capacity to choose not to be monsters, and most of us make that choice most of the time. But the choice is always there. We're never forced by our biology to be good or bad. We decide. Voxstar found himself increasingly disturbed by these conversations. The lieutenant was right. His empathy was genuine, and his manipulation was deliberate. Rodriguez understood the Krath psychology perfectly, knew exactly which explanations would be most unsettling to Krath warriors, and delivered them with sincere compassion for the distress they caused. On the 35th day of the invasion, the Krath Empire suffered a devastating defeat. Human reinforcements arrived from nearby systems, 3 full battle groups with carriers, destroyers, and enough firepower to turn the tide. The Krath fleet was surrounded and offered terms of surrender. Voxstar, sitting in his command center with Lieutenant Rodriguez still present, received the transmission from Admiral Okafor of the human fleet. The Admiral's face on the screen was calm and professional. General Voxstar, Admiral Okafor said, your forces are surrounded. You have fought well, and we respect your courage. But you have lost. Surrender now, and your warriors will be treated with full honors as prisoners of war. Refuse, and we will destroy your fleet. You have 1 hour to decide. Voxstar looked at Rodriguez. Is this genuine? Will you truly honor my warriors? The lieutenant met his eyes. Yes, we will treat them exactly as we treated the prisoners we returned to you. We will care for the wounded, feed the hungry, and return all of them to the Krath Empire when terms are negotiated. We will do this because it's the right thing to do, and because it serves our strategic interests to be seen as honorable victors. Both things can be true at once. And if I refuse? Voxstar asked. If I choose to fight to the death, as Krath honor might demand. Rodriguez's expression grew sad. Real sadness. Voxstar had learned to recognize it. Then we will kill every single warrior in your fleet, and we will mourn you while we do it. We'll feel genuine grief for the waste of life, for the warriors who could have gone home to their families. And we'll still pull the trigger every time until your fleet is destroyed. Human mercy is always optional, General. We offer it when we can, but we're prepared to withdraw it when we must. Voxstar made his decision. For the first time in Krath history, a general surrendered to an enemy not because he was broken, but because he finally understood that fighting further was pointless. You could not defeat an enemy who could feel everything and still fight with perfect efficiency. You could not outmaneuver opponents who used their own empathy as a weapon. The Krath warriors were treated exactly as promised. They were given medical care, food, and respect. When they returned to the Krath Empire 3 months later, they carried with them a new understanding of humanity. These strange beings who could care and kill with equal facility. These contradictory creatures, who were the most dangerous enemies that Krath had ever faced, precisely because they could choose to be anything they needed to be. General Voxstar spent the rest of his life studying humans. He never fought them again. He didn't need to. He had already learned the only lesson that mattered. When facing humans, you were never fighting their biology or their instincts. You were fighting their choices. And that made all the difference. 2 years after humanity's victory over the Krath Empire, the Galactic Council faced a crisis that dwarfed all previous challenges. The Valcross swarm had emerged from deep space, a species unlike any the galaxy had encountered before. The Valcross were not individuals, but a collective organism, billions of small creatures acting as one. They felt no empathy because they had no concept of self and other. They simply consumed, spreading across systems like a plague, stripping worlds of all biological matter and moving on. They could not be reasoned with because they could not communicate. They could not be intimidated because they could not feel fear. The swarm had already consumed 3 border systems. Trillions of beings had died, their worlds left as barren rocks. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, and for the first time, the debate was not about policy or trade or territory. It was about survival. Ambassador Ziral watched as her colleagues struggled with the reality of what needed to be done. The Valorians could barely contemplate military action. Every time they tried to coordinate a defensive strategy, they were overwhelmed by empathic feedback from each other's fear and distress. The Seleni hive mind was fracturing, unable to process the concept of such massive casualties. Even the Krath, fierce as they were, found themselves hesitant. Their honor code demanded personal combat, but how did you find honor in fighting mindless creatures? The council chambers, usually filled with orderly debate, had devolved into something close to chaos. Representatives argued, panicked, and proposed solutions that ranged from fleeing to the far edges of the galaxy to attempting impossible diplomatic contact with the swarm. Dr. Sarah Chun sat in the human delegation area, watching quietly. Humanity now had full observer status after their performance against the Krath, though still not voting membership. Zero found herself watching the human diplomat, searching for any emotional response to the crisis. As always, there was nothing. Just that unsettling calm. Elder Morthas finally called for order. "We must face the truth," the ancient being said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "We are not equipped for this kind of warfare. Our species evolved for cooperation, for coexistence, for emotional connection. We cannot coordinate the kind of campaign needed to stop the Velcross without being paralyzed by our own empathy." "Then we are doomed," said Councillor Valsira. The Seleni representative was visibly shaking, their hive mind struggling to maintain cohesion. "We will debate while the swarm consumes us, world by world, until nothing remains." "Perhaps not," said a new voice. Everyone turned to look at Dr. Chun. The human diplomat stood, and Zero felt a flicker of something from her. Just a brief pulse, there and gone. It might have been determination. "Humanity would like to volunteer," Dr. Chun said calmly. "We will lead the defense against the Velcross." The chamber erupted. Councilors shouted objections, questions, accusations. How could humanity possibly succeed where the combined forces of the galaxy could not? What did they want in return? Was this a ploy to gain power over the council? Dr. Chun waited patiently for the noise to die down. When she spoke again, her voice carried clearly through the chamber. "I understand your concerns," she said. "I understand your fear. And I want to explain exactly why humanity is suited for this task in a way that no other species is." She activated a holographic display. Images of human military forces appeared, alongside data and tactical assessments. The Velcross require a specific kind of opponent. They need someone who can coordinate massive military operations without being emotionally overwhelmed. They need someone who can accept horrific casualties without falling into paralysis. They need someone who can do terrible things that are necessary without being destroyed by guilt in the moment. Zero felt her antennae flatten. She knew where this was going. "Humanity can do all of that," Dr. Chun continued. "Our soldiers can fight the Velcross with unflinching determination because we can temporarily set aside our horror at what we're doing. Our commanders can make brutal calculations about acceptable losses because we can compartmentalize our grief. Our populations can endure wartime hardships because we can toggle between emotional resilience and vulnerable compassion as circumstances require." "You speak of becoming monsters," said Representative Dex Ara of the Krath. The general who had once fought humans now sat on the council as an advisor on human affairs. "You speak of doing whatever is necessary without moral constraint." "No," Dr. Chun said firmly, and now Zirel felt another pulse of emotion from her. Something complex, layered, pride and shame and determination all mixed together. "I speak of doing what is necessary while maintaining moral constraint through choice rather than instinct." She walked to the center of the chamber. "Every species here is limited by their biology. You Valurians cannot coordinate violence because it causes you physical pain to feel the distress of those around you. You Seleni cannot accept mass casualties because you feel each death across your entire hive mind. You Krath are honorable warriors, but you need individual combat to satisfy your psychological needs. All of you are good people, good species, precisely because your biology constrains you toward empathy and cooperation." Dr. Chum paused, and her voice grew softer. "Humans have no such constraints. We can be monsters. We can commit atrocities. We can do horrifying things with clear minds and steady hands. That capacity is what makes us dangerous. But it's also what makes us trustworthy." The confusion in the chamber was palpable. How could the capacity for monstrosity make anyone trustworthy? "Because," Dr. Chun explained, "we choose not to be monsters. Every day, Every human makes that choice. We could be ruthless. We could be cruel. We could take the easy path of violence and selfishness. But we don't. Not because our biology prevents it, but because we consciously decide to be better than our worst impulses. We build societies based on those choices. We create laws and ethics and philosophies, all centered on the question of how to be good when being bad is always an option. She pulled up more images. Human children in schools, learning about ethics and morality. Human courts deciding cases about rights and justice. Human protesters demanding change. Human volunteers helping strangers. We are not naturally good. We work at it. We teach it. We choose it over and over again, despite having the capacity to choose otherwise. Admiral Okafor, who had defeated the Krath fleet, appeared via hologram. "If you allow us to lead this defense," the Admiral said, "we will fight the Vel'Kros with everything we have. We will be efficient, we will be ruthless, and we will do whatever is necessary to win. We will make decisions that would paralyze your species with guilt. We will accept casualties that would break your hearts. We will fight with the cold calculation of machines when that's what's needed." The Admiral's expression grew solemn. "But we will not lose ourselves in the process. After each battle, we will hold memorial services for the fallen. We will deliberately reactivate our full empathy and mourn what we've done, even when it was necessary. We will make ourselves feel the weight of every decision, every casualty, every destroyed world. We will do this because choosing to feel that pain, choosing to carry that burden, is what keeps us human." Dr. Chun spoke again. "We are offering to be your sword against the Vel'Kros. We are offering to do the terrible things that need doing, to make the hard choices, to carry the guilt that comes with necessary violence. And when it's done, we will choose to be your partners in peace, to help rebuild, to use that same capacity for emotional control to work toward healing rather than destruction." "And what guarantee do we have," asked Elder Morthus, "that you will stop? What prevents humanity from becoming the next threat once the Vel'Kros are defeated?" Dr. Chun smiled sadly. "Nothing prevents us," she admitted. "Nothing except our own choices. You're being asked to trust us, and I know how difficult that is. You're being asked to give power to the most dangerous species you've ever encountered. But consider this. We have already defeated the Krath Empire. We could have conquered their worlds, enslaved their people. We didn't. We showed mercy, treated prisoners well, and negotiated fair terms because we chose to. We don't ask you to trust our nature," Admiral Okafor added. "We ask you to trust our choices. We have proven consistently that we choose cooperation over conquest. We choose to be partners rather than predators. Not because we must, but because we believe it's right." The council debated for 3 more days. In the end, they agreed because they had no other option. The Vel'Kros were coming, and only humanity had the psychological profile to fight them effectively. The war lasted 18 months. It was brutal beyond anything the galaxy had witnessed. Human fleets engaged the Vel'Kros in battles that lasted weeks, fighting with relentless efficiency. Human commanders ordered sacrifices that would have broken other species, entire ships and crews deliberately destroyed to save civilian populations. Human soldiers fought the swarm on contaminated worlds, knowing they would not survive but buying time for evacuations. And between battles, they mourned. After every engagement, human ships held memorial services. Soldiers who had fought with machine-like precision hours before now wept openly for fallen comrades. Commanders who had ordered thousands to their deaths now stood before memorials, deliberately allowing themselves to feel the full weight of their decisions. Zero accompanied the human fleets as an observer. She watched as crews transformed, from compassionate individuals to efficient warriors and back again. She saw human medics weep while treating wounded Krath allies who had joined the fight, then returned to their duties with dry eyes. She saw captains make impossible choices, accept the guilt, and continue fighting. The turning point came at the Battle of Kepler Station. The Velcross had surrounded a massive civilian station with 2 million inhabitants from dozens of species. Human Admiral Jang made the decision to use experimental weapons that would destroy the station along with the swarm, but only after confirming that evacuation was impossible and that the Velcross would use the station as a breeding ground to multiply exponentially. Zero was on the bridge when Admiral Jang gave the order. The human woman's face was emotionless, her voice steady. "Fire," she said simply. The weapon worked. The station and the surrounding swarm were vaporized instantly. 2 million lives. Ended in seconds, but it prevented 200 million deaths in the systems beyond. After the battle, Zero found Admiral Jang in the memorial chapel. The Admiral was kneeling before a wall that now listed 2 million names, tears streaming down her face, her body shaking with sobs. "I killed them," Jang whispered. "I gave the order, and I killed them all." Zero sat beside her. For the first time, she deliberately reached out and touched a human who was openly expressing emotion. The pain she felt from Jang was overwhelming, a grief so intense it seemed impossible that anyone could bear it. "You saved billions," Zero said gently. "I know," Jang replied. "That's why I did it. But knowing it was necessary doesn't make it hurt less. I chose to feel this pain. One choose to carry this guilt for the rest of my life. Because if I let myself stop feeling it, then I really would be a monster." The Velcross were finally defeated at the Battle of the Deep Dark, where combined human and galactic forces trapped the swarm's main mass in a star system and triggered the sun to go nova. It was the single most destructive act ever coordinated by sentient species. It was also necessary. In the aftermath, humanity did exactly what they promised. They helped rebuild destroyed worlds. They provided therapy and support to traumatized populations. They created monuments to the fallen, including monuments to the 2 million souls lost at Kepler Station. Every human who had fought in the war carried the psychological scars of what they had done, and they carried those scars openly, refusing to hide from the consequences of their necessary actions. Ambassador Zirel stood before the Galactic Council, one final time, delivering her assessment of humanity. "They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered," she said. "They can do terrible things with clear minds. They can make impossible choices without hesitation. They can be monsters when they choose to be." She paused, looking around at her colleagues. "But they choose not to be. They choose, every day, to be better. They choose to feel empathy, even when suppressing it would be easier. They choose to carry guilt, even when forgetting would be kinder to themselves. They choose to be partners and protectors, despite having the capacity to be conquerors and killers. Humanity's empathy is optional," Zirael concluded. "That is what makes them terrifying. But it's also what makes them trustworthy. They could stop choosing empathy at any time. They have the power to do so, and they don't. That choice, maintained across billions of individuals through conscious moral effort rather than biological imperative, makes humanity the most dangerous and most moral species the galaxy has ever known." The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, not despite their ability to choose when to feel, but because of it. Because sometimes the galaxy needed someone who could do terrible things and still remain good. Someone who could fight monsters without becoming monsters themselves. Someone who could choose